Hi everyone, thanks for being here for the virtual Meet the Employer with the International Association of Bridge, Structural, Ornamental, and Reinforcing Ironworkers Union. I am very excited for you to hear all the great expertise and experience from our panelists. So we'll go through a few housekeeping items and then get started. First, please be sure that your microphone stays muted and your camera stays on. If you have any technical issues or questions during the webinar, you can enter them in the chat and one of our team will respond. Use the reactions whenever you can to share your enthusiasm with our panelists. Lastly, stay adaptable, flexible, and open-minded, and be ready to learn more about your future career. We'll start today talking about getting hired and promoted within the welding industry. Then we'll move on to the live Q&A, so be sure you go to Slido and enter event code 36878 to submit your questions. Finally, we'll wrap up with more information from our panelists about the opportunities they have at Ironworkers Local 597 in Jacksonville and Local 808 in Orlando, and share their contact information with you. Let's get started. The Ironworkers Local Union 597 has a mission of supplying a well-trained and well-qualified workforce to their signatory employers. They do this by offering a 4-year apprenticeship program that highly trains you in all facets of their industry. Their driving philosophy is a commitment to provide the safest, most productive, highly trained, dependable, and reliable, drug-free, and skilled workforce to assist their owners and contractors. First on our panel today is Scott Roy, the President and Training Director for Ironworkers Local 597 and the Joint Apprenticeship and Training Program. Mr. Roy has worked on the buildings that make the skyline of Jacksonville as an apprentice. He has worked as a foreman and general foreman for Northeast Florida's largest steel erector, and after several hundred hours of studying and classroom training, he passed a certified welding inspector exam on his first attempt. Also joining us today is Bobby Corley, President and Training Director for Ironworkers Local 808 in Orlando. He started his welding career in 2004 and graduated his apprenticeship program with the Ironworkers at the top of his class in 2007. He is a certified welding instructor and has been a foreman and general foreman at Kennedy Space Center, Disney at Avatar, and Universal and Daytona Speedway. Thank you for being here today. To get us started, can each of you tell us what is the best part of your job?
Well, I guess I'll start first. I would say the best part of my job is probably the ability to work with individuals that have an interest in not only welding, but the trade that we provide an opportunity to learn. To be able to take somebody from not knowing anything about a job. In fact, some people come in and we have to help them put their hard hat on for the first time, and working them up through the trade and teaching them every little aspect. There's a lot to our trade. There's a lot to the welding industry, and being able to watch somebody grow through a very rewarding trade and experience of learning that's hands-on, that gives you the opportunity with our apprenticeship programs to earn while you learn. You're not paying a tuition. You're going in there and earning a check and learning on the job at the same time, as well as in our classroom, and watching somebody grow through that aspect of things and become a skilled craftsman in our trade, and performing and seeing the things they're proud of and doing the same things I've been able to do. Going back to the flip side where it's personal for me, when I get to drive through Northeast Florida and downtown Jacksonville and see the skyline and see the things that I've physically had my hands on and been a part of building, and knowing that I have a small but important part of the history of the infrastructure in my community. And knowing that my kids can pass that along, even though they can get annoyed by saying, yeah, Dad, we know you built that. We have that opportunity for them to pass that along to their children, and that I've left my mark.
Mr. Corley, how about you?
Yeah, kind of piggyback off Scott a little bit. That's a rewarding part of it, is, seeing the fact that we changed the skyline of the areas we live in. It's very rewarding. It's also nice to provide that opportunity for somebody to literally change their life or get into a good long career, not just a job. We've all been in it for a long time, and if you stick with it, it's a really good long-term career, not just a job. So it's nice on that end. And then just to see all the different things, um, different buildings we're part of, and like Scott said, the kids will get annoyed. Yeah, Dad, I built that, or well, you built that kind of thing. But it's nice to be able to provide that opportunity.
Awesome. Now, what changes have you guys had to do in this pandemic? Mr. Corley, I'll start with you this time.
So we kind of had to structure some online training, which we didn't really do before. Everything was done, with textbook in the classroom and assignment sheets. So with the pandemic, it forced our hand to make the conversion over to online training and some distance learning. We've been kind of on the fence about it, but this made us go forward and do it, and it's been a really good result. The apprentices like it, the instructor likes it. It makes everything a lot more efficient in the classroom, so we get more hands-on time in the shop with the apprentices.
Mr. Roy?
I would again, we fall under the same umbrella of the Ironworkers International, and we work through the same source of material. So we've got an online learning management system or an LMS, as some people may be familiar with it as, and we work through that for web-based or online training. We just do it a little bit different. We do have the students in our classroom. We've had to really limit our class sizes, and it's created a little bit more workflow on the program size, but that's not an issue. We just keep the sizes a little bit smaller in our classroom, keep them properly spaced. There's obviously all the protocol that has to be followed as far as masking mandates and sanitizing. A lot of the administrative stuff, but as far as the quality of learning that our students have gotten, it hasn't suffered at all. In fact, it's really slowed us down and given us the opportunity to get a little bit more into the things that we want to and take the time to do things a little bit differently. But there's been a definite impact. But I'll say, along with what Bobby had said, it's given us opportunities to expand in different areas as far as online learning and distance learning, to where we can actually, we cover a large area here in Northeast Florida and Southeast Georgia. And we do have opportunities that we can provide in the future where we may not be able to have students come to the classroom, but we can still conduct our training and schedule hands-on training, because that's a huge part of what we do, and schedule the hands-on training after that. But even in the field, there's been a lot of differences. Working out in the heat with a mask on and working in the cold can be a whole different environment, and that's a huge part of our trade. So there's been a lot of adaptations that have had to be made, and not in a negative route, but a lot of sacrifices people have had to make to be able to perform on the job and still be productive with the limitations that we have because of the PPE and things like that are required.
Awesome. I actually didn't know that you guys had to adjust that much. But what should I expect on the first day on the welding industry? Mr. Roy, I'll start with you.
Well, the first day, it depends on what you come in with your experience. If somebody's coming in straight with minimal experience, maybe a school-based experience and none on the job, that's probably the easiest path to explain. Open mind, go there ready to work. In our industry, I've always used the catchphrase, if you got time to lean, you got time to clean. And the best thing you can do is observe, listen, and watch at the same time. And sometimes it's just a matter of just being silent, listening, watching, asking questions when appropriate, but expect a hard day's work. But in return for that hard day's work, you're going to get a good, honest day's pay out of it as well. But what you can expect as far as the job goes is to be hands-on, to be thinking, to be constantly trying to think ahead and anticipate the needs of your supervisor and the skilled craftspeople that you're working with. And I can't stress enough being willing to learn and grow in the trade, because it's the basic technology of welding has not changed. It's the same basic premise as it was back in the late 1800s. There's just been a lot of fine tuning of the technology that makes it a lot more user friendly, but can also be more complex in some of the higher end processes.
Mr. Corley, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, definitely on that first day, come ready to work. You're going to be doing a wide variety of work, and be willing to learn and be willing to work together as a team. It's not just a individual accomplishment. It takes a lot of people to get that project done. You have to work together with other people, different backgrounds and stuff. So you definitely want to have that, and then be ready to do some work. That may or may not be welding right off the bat. So you may be doing some fire watch or do some other stuff that, go ahead and prepare for it. But like Scott said, watch, listen, learn, take away from it what you can as much as possible, and then make sure you're there every day. Make sure they really need you there every day and on time, not just, well, I don't feel like going to work today. They have a schedule to meet. They plan for you there 5, 6 days a week, whatever hours you work.
Hmm. Awesome. That's actually honestly pretty cool. Now, we are now going to take some questions from our participants. So be sure to go to slido, sli.do, and enter codes 36878 and to ask your questions. We've dropped that event in the chat so you can reference it there. Christian will be starting your questions with us.
Good morning. I just want to say I've been learning a lot. And the first question I want to ask is, what are some traits you would like to see in people going into the welding industry? What would you like to see in them?
Bobby, I'll go first on this one. I think he can add in afterwards if he wants to, but I'm pretty sure we look for the same thing. Bobby and I have known each other for many years, and we bounce a lot of things off each other. But I would say the biggest thing: reliability, dependability, willingness to work, willingness to learn, honesty and integrity, physical ability. It's the line of work that we do in the ironworking industry is very physical. Not saying you've got to be a superstar athlete, but it would help. It helps when you're physically capable of doing the work. It opens up so many more opportunities for you. Those are probably some of the bigger ones. I don't think I'm sure Bobby can come up with a few. I'll let him kind of chime in on that one.
Yeah, definitely the dependability, reliability, willingness to be trained, and outside of that, attention to detail. Somebody that has a really good eye to catch detail really helps out as well. And sometimes the people that are, believe it or not, they may not have all necessarily the hands-on skills, but they may have the interpretation skills of reading the blueprints or leadership. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to add on to that. But Scott hit the nail pretty well on the head with everything on his answer.
Okay. And what steps do you see you would have to take after an interview in this field? What would you have to do after? How would you prepare yourself?
This one can be answered many different ways. In the state of Florida, we have 5 separate apprenticeship programs. They all run autonomously. They run on their own guidelines and rules, governed by some basic federal and state guidelines that we have to follow, and very similar. There's a lot of similarities in them, but with us, after the interview, being prepared to go to work, being flexible. The construction industry as a whole is a living, breathing animal that can change at the drop of a hat. I've always told people that, you could be expecting one thing one day, and depending on the company and who you're working for, you could be in a whole another world. Being properly rested, taking care of your body and all that is only going to prepare you better. Especially in the summer heat, being properly hydrated. I can tell you, I've always been I've hydrated properly, and there was days it just wasn't enough. So you've got to take care of your body and think about your body, because your body is what's out there making money for you and your family, as well as our contractors and our organizations. But I think that's probably the best way to answer that one there.
And to add on to that, what do you see is your favorite part about in being in this field, welding? What is it that draws you to this?
Scott, I'll take that one if you're all right. The best part about it is, like we said earlier, we get to literally change the skyline of the areas we live in. Here in Central Florida and Orlando area, we have the theme parks and the space center. So a lot of the work we do is literally seen around the world. People come here and get pictures of the rock work and theme work we do at the theme parks in the background. And of course, everybody has eyes on the space race again, waiting to see what NASA and SpaceX are going to do. So it's definitely nice to have that advantage here in our jurisdiction.
Yeah, that is cool seeing the work you've done and like what people appreciate it for and all that. It's really cool. Where do you see the welding industry being after many years? Like, is it going to be the same? Is it going to prosper?
I think I'll go ahead and try to answer that. The best way I can see, the best place I can see it, there's been an outcry for several years from the welding industry and the American Welding Society of a shortage of welders. I couldn't begin to even quote the numbers because they change every year, and they just keep going up and up and up. And knowing that there's going to be a shortage in welders, you can't help but be confident there's going to be work. You just got to find, as far as welding goes, you got to find the right place, because that shortage in welders is going to be across the board. I can speak probably on behalf of my organization as well as Bobby's in Orlando. We provide a labor force, a skilled workforce for our employers that are generally considered ironworkers. That's what we go by. Welding is the biggest part of what we do. And one of my additional duties is to dispatch our membership to work with our employers. And I think this is probably blanketed across the country. 90% of our calls are certified welders. Whether somebody's ever going to weld on the job or not, they're going to call for a welder, because if they need that welder, then they're there. And usually the people that can weld have a little bit different head about them. They've got a different skill set. They've got a willingness and an ability to do other things, because there's a skill set that goes with it. There's a ability to comprehend things a lot of times better. And bottom line, that welder is valuable. The welder is what holds things together. Until they come up with a new technology that can hold things together better than melting two pieces of metal together, I don't know what other opportunities there are. It's going to hold better than nails. I know that.
I have a little fun question. I wonder, what are some mistakes or like something that happened that they future employees can learn on, so that they may not do the same thing, or they can learn upon it?
Attendance, attendance, reliability, and then don't come in, but if you went through a welding school, don't come in overconfident. Well, I went to school, I can pass the test. That's probably the biggest thing, is not listening to the CWIs in the shop. We try to explain to them precisely what we're looking for on the test and what will cause them to fail. And it goes in one ear and out the other, and then they fail a test and they get mad because, so they didn't do something we told them not to do. And they get some slag or get some garbage trapped in the weld. So definitely listen to the guys in the shop. This way, hopefully you can go in and pass your test on the first try. And then when you go out on your first job, just be ready to be trained and listen and work. Don't show up and stand around. We're there to do a job, and it's hard labor, but it pays. It's worth it at the end of the day.
So there's a lot happening right now, but what are some things that could be looked for the welding industry? What are some technologies that are coming out? Some maybe tools? What's new with that?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I think within our line of work, we're pretty nuts and bolts, standard. at least in my area, shielded metal arc and flux core. We don't dive into TIG. Bobby may be able to answer this one a little bit better because they get more specialized welding. We don't do a lot of TIG in our area. We got the capabilities. Both of us have AWS accredited testing facilities, as well as all the other 3 programs in Florida do, which is a big badge of honor for all of our organizations. But I would say I don't have a good answer for that. But the process is just the fine tuning of the process is a lot of the virtual stuff that's coming out. I think there's going to be a lot more stuff with that coming, and remote type stuff is going to be some of the bigger things that make a change. But Bobby might have some input on that.
Yeah, surprisingly, we don't have a whole lot of TIG. We get a little bit out at Disney. We just got into where we're doing a lot more pipe welding now. So that's been a big benefit in our area, keeping some more guys working. But most of it, I mean, the nuts and bolts of it is stick and flux core. We don't have a lot of dual shield or anything like that. It's flux core wire and stick are the 2 biggest ones. So the guys that have the flux core papers that can actually do it in the field, we never see them back here. They keep their own jobs and they stay out in the field and call us just to let us know they're switching contractors pretty much.
And another thing, how do you what are some things that could help you like be prepared for an interview? Like what could you do the day before so that you're ready for that interview?
For an interview with our organization, that really every program again has their own guidelines they follow, but there's really not, you can prepare yourself by being yourself and being honest. We're in the construction industry. We're oftentimes looking at entry-level people. So we're looking for people that are willing to come in and tell us who they are, tell us what they're bringing to the table. And oftentimes that's a welding education from a school with minimal field experience, which we're very much okay with. And pleased to deal with and willing to work with, definitely. But just being open and honest, and some safety training ahead of time would be beneficial for some people. Like OSHA 10 in the construction industry, it saves some time. I think all programs accept that prior to the program itself, and it can bypass you a little bit of training. It's 10 hours of training you wouldn't have to attend. But I think the biggest thing preparing for the interview, relax, understand that everybody puts their pants on one leg at a time in the morning, and understand you're coming in and we're looking at you to be an asset with us. So show us that you're going to be an asset. Show us that you're going to be an investment that's worthwhile, and that you're going to be with us for the long haul.
I'm going to piggyback off Scott a little bit. Yeah, just come in, be open-minded, honest, let us know. If you don't have experience, that's great. We're a training program. We're an apprenticeship. We're going to teach you everything on that end. Also too, we have some people that may have background issues. Don't worry about those. Just come in, relax, be yourself. We're going to talk. We're going to try to make the interview as painless as possible and still have some fun with it. So that really the biggest things, just come in, be honest, and answer the questions honestly.
And this is a question for both of you. How did you guys know you wanted to be a welder? Like what inspired you, or who maybe mentored you to wanting to be a welder?
Bobby, you can go first.
So welding, I was actually in the trade. I was in high school and built a swamp buggy in my shop class and really enjoyed it. Like, in all seriousness, I didn't have any clue about it. And the shop teacher let me bring in an old Willys station wagon Jeep and chop it up and weld it back together in shop class. And I absolutely loved it. And he recommended that I come over to this apprenticeship. I mean, there's another part of that story that's not as funny, but that's the gist of it. That, I came here, I was really set up to go be a mechanic. And then when I had to fabricate that frame and all the body work for it to put on the car, I enjoyed that a lot more than just turning the wrenches on a car. So got into that, and just to help through the trade, it's been a really good thing.
For me, I was born and raised in a union family. My stepfather was a ship fitter and a welder up in Maine at a shipyard where I was born and raised. I'd heard about it. I never had to want for anything when I was a kid. I knew that my family took care of me. I knew that my stepfather made good money and had good benefits and had a good retirement coming. And now that he's hitting the retirement age, I know he has a good retirement. And I don't have to worry about my parents and their future. And I can feel confident that they can take care of themselves and they're going to enjoy the life that they worked for. And after high school, I went into the Marine Corps for 8 years and got out and really didn't know what I was going to do. I tried another industry. It didn't work out for me. It just wasn't what I wanted to do. And eating dinner with a family friend one night, he recommended I come down to the Ironworkers and talk to the business representative that was here, and he offered me a job on the spot. I got fortunate with that, with just kind of walking into it. I was reluctant. I asked him to give me 2 weeks to try to figure things out, and he was willing to do that, but couldn't promise me anything in 2 weeks. Well, the next day I decided, no, I'm going to take the opportunity. And at that point, I realized the connection between the welding industry from what I was doing or getting into and what my stepfather went into and was doing. And I started realizing that I had the same opportunity for my family that he provided for me as a child. And I have that. And it's only grown. My opportunities have grown from that, just like anybody's can. And that's really what got me here, is a little bit of unintentional guidance from my family. I was never pushed into it. It was just something I kind of fell into, and then realized when I got into it, wow, look what I fell into. And I've never looked back and have no intentions of looking back until it's time for me to retire and reap the benefits of what I've worked for.
That's awesome. For the high schoolers out there who inspired to be welders, what is one class you took in high school that you thought was meaningless, but you can now find that it had some meaning and that it was valuable to you?
As much as I hate to say it, geometry and math. That's probably the biggest one that I can relate to. And to be honest, when I was about 29 or 30 years old, I reached back to my school's website and I found my geometry teacher, Mr. Porter, and I emailed him and I said, you probably don't remember me, you probably don't remember this, but I remember telling you that I'm never going to need this in my life. And out in the field, I use a Pythagorean theorem, even though nobody knows to call it that. They don't connect it and relate it because we make it a lot more simple. But those type of concepts and basic fractions are an everyday thing with me. Even today, I mean, when I teach our pre-apprenticeship and our apprenticeship class, we have several hours of math training that we have to do, and it's all construction math that we do. We deal a lot with 8/16, halves, and quarters and things like that. It's all what's on tape measure is what we predominantly deal with. But I would say that's the biggest thing. As much as people despise math, and I know probably more people despise math than any other subject, pay attention, grasp it, retain it. If you want to be in the metal industry at all, whether it's any kind of welding or construction, you're going to need these math numbers and you're going to need to understand it, because you'll reflect back to it and say, I remember that, and I'm glad I remember that.
Yes, definitely in agreement with Scott. Definitely the math portion of it. We literally spend hours on it in every class. Anything from fractions to geometry and trig. We do try to make it a little bit more relatable to the subject matter, not just, A times B, anything like that. We actually spell out what the formulas are and make it relate. So the apprentices grasp it a lot better than maybe you will in high school, because it's hard to make it to relate something into high school until you actually get out and do some hands-on stuff. But definitely the math subject.
And with the current situation we are in now with the COVID pandemic, I wanted to know, what is a typical day at work for you guys? What do you guys, do during your work day?
So it has changed, but it hasn't in a way. There's just a lot more safety protocol in place now with masks, a lot of constant wipe down of doorknobs, handles, the common surfaces. And then the job sites, when we go to different job sites, when we visit them, we need to actually check ahead to see what their safety requirements are. Some of our contractors don't allow the neck gaiters. It has to be an actual two-piece mask. Some of them you have to have it on when you're on site. Some of them you don't have to have it on unless you're 6 feet away, closer than 6 feet from somebody. So just making sure that, we follow all the guidelines and recommendations, and that when the apprentices are here for training, we keep them safe. Same thing, we keep them separated. While they're in the classroom, they have masks on, and we wipe all the surfaces down real well. The break room we had, unfortunately, kind of went away because it's a congregation area, and we don't want them all huddled up in one spot.
I'll piggyback off that, and we fall under the same thing.
All right, thank you. At this time, I'm gonna take it over back to Earl with more questions for you guys.
Alrighty, thank you, Christian. I actually only have one more question for you guys. And that would be like, what if you guys could leave future welders with one piece of advice, what would it be?
Work hard. This is going to become one piece of advice that's multifaceted. Work hard, give everything you've got, but save enough to go home and be with your family, and save enough of your energy and everything about you to put family first. But remember that to put family first, you've got to make that paycheck and be able to provide for your family and give them everything you want to give them. But have that good balance between work and in your career and family. I mean, if you can find out that masterpiece and balance that, there should be no reason you can't be successful in whatever you do.
Yeah, same thing. Work hard, learn to balance the personal life and the work life. It is a challenge. Also, remember when you're at work, especially as an apprentice, you're building your reputation. That reputation follows you once you graduate. So make sure you build a good reputation for yourself and a good name. A lot of the guys have a tendency to sometimes mess up, and the apprenticeship pool is a lot smaller than the journeyman pool. So it follows you over there once you get out of the apprenticeship program. Balance is definitely a key thing between work and personal life.
Those are some wise words from both of you, and I'm sure everyone who's here will definitely keep that to heart. Thank you so much for your wisdom and sharing your experiences with us. I know our audience found the information helpful in planning their career path. Now we'd love to hear from you all about the opportunities you have to be a part of your companies and organizations.
All right, I'm going to give you a quick run through of the Ironworkers International and the Ironworker Apprenticeship programs and local unions in the Florida area. We like letting people know your future starts today. It's the day that you want it to start. And when you're ready to move on, when you're ready to take an opportunity with us, we have plenty of opportunities to provide. It's what you're willing to put into it. Next slide, please. We've got this driving philosophy. It's a commitment for us to provide the safest, and you can click through this slide, please. There's several bullet points that pop through with it. The safest, most productive, highly trained, dependable and reliable, drug-free, we've got a skilled workforce that assists our owners and contractors to complete their projects safely, on time, and within budget. We're here to make money just as much as our employers are here to make money, and the better that they do, the better we do. And the more opportunities that we can provide for them that are quality opportunities, the better off they're going to be, as well as us. And we're very safety driven. We've got a couple bullet points here that our safety training that we conduct is OSHA 10, OSHA 30, OSHA Subpart R, which is steel erection safety. We have a heavy emphasis on that. First aid and CPR training. It's critical that we've got the people that are first aid and CPR trained on every job. It's dangerous work, and we want to make sure we have somebody there to respond and handle the first aid and emergency care as we get started. And then everything we do working with cranes. We're on the hook end of the crane, so we're not on the actual operating side of the crane. We got to have qualified riggers and qualified crane signalers. A lot of safety hazards that we're associated with. So we do silica training, which is a lot of exposure to just general dust on the job, is probably one of the most common ones. Scaffold user and erector. We work on scaffolds quite a bit, the ability to use them safely and properly, as well as put them up and tear them down when needed. Lead hazard. We do a lot of work in exposure to lead abatement. We don't physically do the lead abatement, but we have to be aware of when we're going to get exposed to structural steel members that are coated in lead-based paints and things of the such. Fall protection. We work at heights, so we've got to have protection and be trained on how to recognize hazards so we're working as safe as possible. And then aerial lift and forklift hazards. We do a lot of training in that because those are tools of our trade that we utilize to access points and to be able to lift things from one point to another. And being able to recognize the hazards associated with that makes us safer users of those pieces of equipment. Some programs have a pre-apprenticeship program, and there's a couple more. You keep clicking one more box there. Some programs have a pre-apprenticeship program. Of the 5, I believe right now we have 2 in Jacksonville and Tampa that have a registered pre-apprenticeship program. Registered meaning it's approved by the state of Florida. It provides just an introduction to the trade. It gets some of the basic training out of the way and gives you a good grasp of what this trade is all about without investing a whole bunch of your time and effort. You may find out during the pre-apprenticeship that this trade isn't for you, but we also might find out in our pre-apprenticeship programs that you bring a little more to the table than we had thought you had, and we have the ability to recognize that and acknowledge that with advanced credit if need be, if you bring more to that table. But in that, we cover the 4 basic primary aspects of our trade, which is structural steel erection, rigging and cranes, reinforcing concrete or tie-in rebar, and architectural ornamental steel, which would be putting up windows, curtain walls, and things like that. Training for success. All of our programs are 4 years, all 5 of them. For the most part, we do 2 semesters per year, and that'll oftentimes be broken down into 50-hour blocks where you're coming to class for 50 hours at a time. If you click again, there should be some more information up there. 2 weeks at a time, roughly 102 hours of classroom time. We run about 1,400 hours on the job a year. That's usually the bare minimum. Most people attain that or get closer to 2,000 hours a year on the job, and some exceed it. But our apprentices come to class usually from 7 a.m. and it varies per program, 7 a.m. to 5:30. Monday through Friday for 2 weeks, and you do that twice a year, and that's where you get the basic understanding and fundamentals of the trade, and then apply them on the job during the apprenticeship on the job training experience. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what a 4-year curriculum looked like, and again, this varies all over, but in the first year, you're going to be exposed to reinforcing concrete and architectural ornamental. And those are the first 2 semesters. So the first 6 months you'll come in and get that training, and then you'll go into the second one. There's usually a lot of classes that are mixed in with these, but these are the primary focuses of those timeframes that you come in. Into the second year, you're going to be exposed to structural steel erection and rigging and cranes. And again, basic topics of those, but those are going to be the predominant topics of study during those timeframes. As you get into the third year, you'll be exposed to blueprint reading, foreman training, and instrumentation. And this is an example of basically what my program's set up with. And again, they all vary throughout the state. In Jacksonville, we have it up where the last year and a half, and you can pull up the 4th year here, is it's a year and a half of welding. And you're looking at roughly 300 hours of welding. So we can ensure that you have the basic fundamentals of and qualifications to be able to apply your welding on the job, because there's a big difference in welding in a shop environment that's controlled and applying it out in the field. So as we get further into our welding program and you complete some of the courses of study and complete your certifications, we're going to try to put you in some real world situations so that we can ensure that you can apply it in the field too, and try to make it a little bit realistic and get you out of the booth and weld on in some different situations. Next slide, please. One of the topics that we cover is reinforcing steel. There's not a whole lot of welding that goes into this, but there is some welding involved in reinforcing steel. And that's actually the welding of the rebar together. It's a lot of small welds, but it's one of the more common ways of attaching it, especially in the nuclear industry, where you're not having the physical bar splices. A lot of it gets welded, but that's a big part of what we do, is placing rebar and tying it together so that concrete can be poured on it, because that's what ties the structure into the actual structural steel member if it's attached that way. Next slide, please. Here's just some pictures of the classroom training or shop training that we do, where we actually put you in a smaller scaled down version of rebar training, where you're actually implementing what you learn in the classroom and getting the ties. And we try to just teach you the fundamentals and get some repetition down so you can understand it. Next slide. Architectural and ornamental is another part of our work. A lot of people don't necessarily associate this with ironwork, but what you're looking at, what you can see in that picture behind, was a curtain wall on a structural building, where we come in, and because of the fact that the building gets wrapped in that glass and it attaches to the structure itself, and there's metal components that go with that, that gives us another way to claim that type of work to where we install it. And iron and glass usually don't seem like two things that go together, but when you tie them together, and we can wrap the shell of a building with architectural appearance, or it may be some kind of precast. But there's a lot to that part of it, including stairways, catwalks, doorways, and things like that we can be exposed to. And we have several contractors that bid that work and get that work all throughout the state, especially down in the Miami area. There's a lot of it down there with the high rises. Next slide, please.
Scott, can I interject something on that?
Yes, sir.
With that architectural ornamental class too, we do some of the glass work here in Orlando, but out at the theme parks, we get the chance to hang a lot of signs, put in literally miles of handrail. We cover that in that class. So there's a broad topic in that class, and it's definitely worthwhile. It's probably one of our more hands-on and depth classes that we actually do.
Good. Thank you, Bobby. Here's some pictures. These are pictures from Tampa, the Tampa Training Center, where they're actually installing the glass panels that are going in. There's many different ways you can do it. In fact, sometimes the ways we train in a classroom environment, you may go out to a job and have to relearn because it's just a different setup. It's a different manufacturer. But sometimes you may roll into it where what you trained on is exactly what's being used on the job. So you can run into that, but you'll have some fundamentals and understanding of at least how to handle things properly. Next slide, please. There's a picture of the skyline of the city of Jacksonville, because we talk about the skyline and how we have our hands on it. You can look at all those primary buildings there. If you're familiar with Jacksonville, what's the Wells Fargo building now? It used to be the Independent Life, the Bank of America building, which has that peak on it. The SunTrust building, or I think it's the ViStar Tower now. There's several of those. Our members back in the 80s and 90s worked on those. You can't see it in this picture, but behind there is Duval County Courthouse, which is a massive courthouse with some structural steel and precast concrete. I worked on that job for a year and provided for my family very well for one whole year on that job. And we welded a lot of precast concrete into place on that job and set it. It was a very fun job to be on. But in this, we cover a lot of stuff with the structural steel, from the history to the unloading and handling of it, the erection of the beams and columns, plumbing, aligning, and bolting, getting everything right. And we talk about plumbing, we're not talking about putting the pipe in it and running the water and all of that. We're talking making sure it's going straight up and down and not leaning left or right. But it can go to bridges, clear span structures, modular structures. In Orlando, they talk about roller coasters because they get the opportunity to build the roller coasters there, and the theme park rides and the exciting things. And then the bigger structures, for example, with them at Cape Canaveral. And then there's a lot of industrial work that we touch on here. Jacksonville's a very industrial area. We've got several paper mills in our territory. And so we do a lot of maintenance work in paper mills, which are very corrosive environments. So you're working with a lot of rusted metals and repairing and replacing those, which can be a lot of interesting work to do. Next slide, please. Here's a picture. This is our structural steel training unit that we have. It's a small unit. We don't need much because it covers all the basic connections. It gives a simulated feel without being at height. So we're not throwing our apprentices up at high elevations right off the bat. We're in the process of getting something a little bit larger. I know in some of the training centers, they have 2-3 story structures that they work with for their training, which is an awesome opportunity to get up off the ground and be comfortable with it and be in a controlled environment where you have that. And that's what it's all about. We're in our training programs in the classroom, we're not so much geared towards production and speed as we are as quality, safety, and ensuring that you get the basic fundamentals of it. So if you're afraid of heights in this industry, it's something that you'll probably learn to get over. When I got into this trade, I had respect and a fear of heights. You learn to respect it even more and get past that fear a little bit, but always be cautious and ready to put yourself in a position to make sure you're being as safe as possible, because we can't emphasize the safety enough at all. Next slide, please. So on the job training, this is a job we had. This is what I was talking about, where this is Wolfson's Children's Hospital in Jacksonville. It's a job we built probably about 9-10 years ago, but it's a good picture of one of our connectors. That's probably the poster child of our line of work is the connectors. They're the ones that are hanging on the iron and making the connections where you can see a beam at the top coming in. They're going to make that connection and they're going to put some bolts in it and cut it loose from the crane. And they're going to keep going and box that whole area in so everybody else can come in and clean up their quick and easy work. But they're going to make a showing. That's the high profile stuff, the high climbers that we see that are going to provide the basic framework of what we need. And it's just a couple people doing it. Next slide. Cranes and rigging. This is actually a image from the Jacksport here in Jacksonville. The work that we do involves cranes and rigging a lot, picking things up and moving them. And cranes and rigging can be all kinds of different things. It can be working with chain falls and come-alongs, with rollers and skids and skates and things. It's the process of moving something from one point to another, typically from one elevation to another. But sometimes it's on the same elevation, and we've got to really think outside the box. This is probably one of the most critical thinking portions of our trade, because there's a lot of math that goes into it. There's a lot of thinking and geometry that goes into it. And really, it could be a more dangerous part of our trade if you're not thinking clearly and properly trained in calculations and understanding rigging principles and theories. Next slide, please. During this course, we cover a lot from ropes, picking up devices, picking up tanks and moving them, pieces of equipment, and getting the basic understanding of it, from slings, chains, rigging tools, understanding how cranes work. Even though we don't operate the cranes, we need to understand the physics of the cranes and how they do what they need to do, and what their limitations and capacities are. Next slide, please. And here's some images of training opportunities where you get to pick things up and move them from point A to point B, sometimes snaking them through tight holes just to get an understanding of how to switch from one rigging technology to another. Next slide, please. One of the more overlooked portions of our training tends to be the leadership parts of it. An introduction to blueprints, which is a very basic introduction. We really touch on blueprints in every single one of our courses. There's a big part of each course, usually a unit or two, that covers blueprints, but there's a fundamental part that we have to learn as well when it comes to welding and to the ironworking industry, because there's a lot of symbols. Welding is probably a bigger part of that because there's so much information in welding symbols. So being able to understand all that and relay that and apply it to the blueprints, because blueprints are written in so many different ways, you've got to be able to understand them, and you can't build a building without the blueprints. Then we have our foreman training course, which is geared to set every one of our apprentices up for success in this line of work and to be a leader. That's our goal. Not everybody's going to be a leader, but we want to give you the tools to be that leader if you see that opportunity for you. And with that, you've got to be able to know how to lay things out. This is where we get into the math a little bit heavier, into some trigonometry, understanding how to convert that stuff and make the measurements and lay things out and find out what maybe missing measurements are in a process that you're working with. Next slide, please. Welding, what everybody's probably here for. We have a lot of opportunities with oxy-fuel cutting and welding because even though there's a lot of technologies and power tools that are out there to help cut things, cutting with an oxy-fuel torch is a skill that is going to carry you over. I think it's one of the skills that's kind of fading away in the industry, and we've got to make sure we maintain that because it's a very valuable skill, and it takes some learning to do. So if you can ever focus on oxy-fuel welding, or I'm sorry, oxy-fuel cutting, focus on that. But we touch on oxy-fuel welding as well. Then we get our introduction to welding, which usually goes pretty easy. That's some fundamental stuff, basic terminology. That usually gets touched on early on in one of the first year classes, but we just link it into this as the bulk of our training. Then after that, a big focus on shielded metal arc welding and some certifications on that. You should leave every one of our programs with an AWS accredited testing facility certification with unlimited thickness, shielded metal arc welding certification in all position. You should be able to do pretty much anything with any kind of welding rod on structural steel once you complete one of our any of our programs. And then you move into flux core arc welding, which is the number 2 process that we use. It's used a lot in different areas. Shielded metal arc is more common because it's a little bit more of a user-friendly skill set and a little bit more portable. Flux core is going to be high production. It's going to take a little bit more skill, and just about everybody tests to unlimited thickness, all position flux core welding as well. And then some programs will dive into TIG. We're all set up and capable of doing it. We just do it. We touch on it based on the needs of our contractors and our the facilities that we work in. Next slide, please. Like I said, all of our programs are accredited testing facilities with the American Welding Society. We have all worked. We have all worked hard to get this accreditation. We test our members and have a stamp of approval from the American Welding Society. And as I said earlier, it's a badge of honor for us to have this and maintain it. And we hope everybody gets that opportunity to work with us because there's no cost to our welding training. And I can't pitch that enough. I don't know if I've said it yet, but all of this is tuition-free opportunities within our organization, and you'll never have to pay any training costs or anything like that. And at least any major ones. There may be some fees in different areas for testing, but they're low fees. And I think the fee may only be present if you don't pass the test. And again, it's a fair fee. Next slide, please. Here's some images from some of the weld tests. We're looking for quality. Again, we do mainly 3G, which is vertical, and 4G testing, which qualifies for all position. There may be some situations you have to do a 2G test, depending on the contractor that you're working for, as well as the 3G and 4G. But we're looking for quality welders, consistent, and you're not going to hide. Most of us just do bend tests on site in our testing facilities, and you're not going to hide from the bend test. We'll see it all. Next slide, please. Getting started with any of our organizations, the big thing, and I'm going to break down what programs require what in a little bit, but for the most part, you apply. You have to have a driver's license, a social security card, and a willingness to undergo training and provide that documentation and accept the understanding that you're going to train. And then not all programs have it, but a couple of them is predominantly, I think it's just Tampa and Jacksonville right now. You've got to complete a pre-apprenticeship program before you can get into the apprenticeship program. You interview. You'll interview before a board of trustees, which is a joint effort between the contractors of the local area as well as a union representation. They're going to interview you, make sure you're fit for the program and that you're ready to do it and committed. And after the interview, you'll have to take a drug test. Our contractors want drug-free workers, so there'll be drug tests at the beginning, during, after your whole career. There's going to be drug tests, so you're expected to be drug-free. And then after that, you're in the apprenticeship program if you get accepted. And that's where the opportunity begins that you earn and you learn. And most programs, you're getting raises every couple months. I know in my program, every 6 months, assuming that you're going to work every day and getting 700 hours of training on the job and work experience on the job, and you're coming to class twice a year as you're supposed to, you're going to get anywhere from $1.20 to $1.50 an hour raise every 6 months for the 4-year apprenticeship program. And I think every program kind of balances out very similar to that. Next slide, please. The requirements. Every program, you've got to be at least 18 years old to do so. There's been some talk that some of the pre-apprenticeships are going to be going to 17 years old. So high school seniors will have an opportunity to complete pre-apprenticeship programs. I know that's something we've looked at. You may not get the on-the-job experience during the pre-apprenticeship, but you can at least get the classroom experience of our pre-apprenticeship out of the way and be ready to join the apprenticeship right out of high school. You've got to be drug-free. You got to be physically capable of performing the work. I talked about how physical it can be. You'll figure that out on your own when you get on the job. And if you can't make it, that's usually how people wash themselves out when they realize they can't make it. And it's harder than they expected. You got to have a valid driver's license. I believe that's just about everywhere. You got to have reliable transportation because it's our responsibility to get to work. Sometimes public transportation doesn't go where we go for the job. You've got to have a Social Security card and provide that to us because our contractor is going to need that. Now, many of the programs do require a high school diploma or a GED. We'll break that down on one of the next slides, but not all programs do. We understand that some programs understand that it's not for everybody, that they weren't able to get that, but I think it does have a big influence on your ability to be accepted in, whether you have it or not. Next slide, please. So the money. This is what everybody always wants to know about, and this is how the little slide, hopefully it's big enough to be read, but you can see how we're set up, and it's just in numerical order from local 272 in Miami all the way down to local 808 in Orlando. And you can see that the pre-apprenticeship is in two of the programs, and that's Tampa and Miami. I'm sorry, Tampa and Jacksonville. All of us have four-year apprenticeship programs. Pretty much all of us have classroom training of 204 hours a year. Tampa has a little bit extra with 30 extra hours. We all do day school. There's no night school in any of our programs, so you'll be expected to take time off of work and come in for training. Our contractors are all on board with that. Pretty much everybody except Miami has an hours requirement that you've got to work at least 1,400 hours a year. Miami, it's 1,600, and that's to be able to advance. A lot of that's governed by the state and the federal Department of Labor. Tampa and Jacksonville are the only ones that don't have a requirement for high school diploma or GED. But I can attest that if you don't have a high school diploma or GED, it does make things a lot harder for you and lowers your ability to be eligible for the program. The lowest starting wages in each of the programs are listed in here. They range from the lowest being, I guess, $12.75 in Miami up to $20.34 in Mobile. And I talk about Mobile, Alabama. I didn't touch on them enough. They cover the panhandle, even though they're from another state. They cover the panhandle of Florida. So even though there's a lot of people out there, that's who covers that. And if you're ever curious about who's covering what area, you can reach out to any of these programs and they'll tell you exactly who you can get in contact with. And then the journeyman rate. That's the when you've completed the apprenticeship and you've earned all the certifications and got to that point where you're a skilled craftsperson in the trade. This is the top dollar. I say top dollar. This is the minimum top dollar that you'll receive working in that trade. And it ranges from anywhere $25.49 all the way up to $33 an hour. And I do want to stress a lot of places that you work, your benefits, your retirement, and your healthcare will come out of your wages. We're a little bit different. That doesn't come out of your check. This is pretty much what you're earning and bringing home every day or every hour that you work. So there's respectable wages that go up all the time. The last thing on here is if the applications are available online, it's split 50-50. 3 of them have them available online and 3 don't. You can check with those programs. I think the ones that don't, you physically have to go there to apply in person. Next slide, please. All the programs are tuition free. I think that's one of the biggest selling points we hear. There's a phrase that's been going on a long time that apprenticeships are the best kept secret in America. And it continues on. There's been recently a lot more talk about apprenticeship due to some legislation coming from the Department of Labor and the White House. Apprenticeship is 100% tuition free. There's no cost to you. All the programs have health benefits and pension retirement benefits. Some of them offer annuity, which is almost like a secondary retirement. That's just a flat cash number that they'll provide for you. But I want to go back to that. You don't have to turn the slide back. The fact that the programs are tuition free, it doesn't cost you anything. The big difference is we're not taking everybody who applies in. There's an accepting process, unlike a lot of colleges and universities, and I'm not downplaying that, but they've got the tuitions, they can bring people in. we're a little bit more selective, and we don't have as many opportunities. We only have set amount of positions to put people in and train. So our acceptance numbers are a little bit low in the overall number comparably to any place with tuition. So that's one of the biggest differences there. Next slide, please. Anybody that's a veteran or considering going into the military in the future, we are approved for the GI Bill. We have veterans that come through, and if they participated in the Montgomery GI Bill or the post 9/11 GI Bill while they were in the military, we're going to help you out in any way we can with that. And that, since we are tuition free, is money in your pocket. Anywhere up to, I think it's roughly over $1,000 a month that you'll receive from Department of Veteran Affairs that will just help you, because you're going from a military career into a possibly lower paying line of work and earning an education at a lower rate. So they're going to help compensate that and offset those costs for you. And you're going to get extra money to participate in the program. It's a good incentive for anybody who doesn't want to go to college that wants to utilize their GI Bill still. I utilized it when I got out. There's a really nice bump in my pay that I hated to see go when I completed the apprenticeship program, but it has to stop at some point. Next slide, please. We've got a great career. I've been able to provide for a family. I know Bobby, who's on here with me, he's been able to, as well as all the other apprenticeship directors in Florida and that represent the Florida Ironworkers and the other trades. We've provided for families and had great careers, and we enjoy it. We wouldn't be in the positions we are if we didn't have a deep passion for it. So if this is an opportunity you're interested in, our information is going to be on the next slide. And you can look us up. A simple Google search sometimes will be there. These are your point of contacts for all the organizations. And for some reason, Bobby Corley didn't end up on there. I must have left him off, but we will make sure his information does get on there and put in the notes on the video somehow. But these are your point of contact. And if you want to get a hold of Bobby Corley, you can get a hold of me, Scott Roy, and I will make sure you get a hold of him. Bobby, I'm sorry about that. But these are your point of contacts for the different areas. Again, if you're not sure who to reach out to or what area you're going to be falling into and what's going to be best for you, any of us will be willing to help you out with that. Bobby, would you like to add anything to it?
No, I'm good, Scott. You hit everything pretty well on the head with all that. I mean, all the programs have basically the same requirements, and then there's just a couple minor differences. Nothing too drastic.
Good. Thank you. I believe that's all I have. If there's any questions for us.
Right, that was some great stuff. Thank you so much for all you've shared with us and for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be part of this event. We are sharing information on the screen now if you'd like to reach out to the team at the Ironworkers for more information. And we encourage you to follow up. Thanks for being a part of the virtual Meet the Employer. Join us on January 26th with Penske. Goodbye.